One of the biggest mistakes we make with our introductions, and one simple way to fix that mistake and make our speech introductions a lot more engaging, is by simply saving the name of the person we're introducing for the end. The idea about doing a good job when we're introducing somebody on stage is to get the audience excited about who's about to come next. And by saving the name for the end, we can just build so much more anticipation for the audience, even if they already know who the speaker is. Here's an example of one of my favorite speakers, Tom Willieu, doing just that. Notice how he saves the name of the person he's calling on for the end and how he lists all their credentials before that and just builds so much more anticipation in the crowd.
Today's guest is one of the greatest thinkers of our generation. He's a multiple-time best-selling author who's written a seemingly impossible 6 books in the last 5 years. His meditation on Stoic philosophy, The Obstacle is the Way, is not only a true perennial seller, it's been translated into more than 20 languages and has a devoted following of some of the most driven and successful people on the planet, including NFL coaches, world-class athletes, entrepreneurs, TV personalities, and even political leaders. So please, help me in welcoming the best-selling author of Ego is the Enemy and most recently, perennial seller, the modern-day philosopher king, Ryan Holiday.
And the introduction just sounds so much better when the name is saved for the end. And that's what we're going to discuss here today. How to make our speech introductions a lot more engaging. Hey, my name is Rudeep and I'm the founder of Frantically Speaking, and I love learning about effective communications and sharing those learnings with you so that you can level up your communications game as well. When you're introducing somebody, it doesn't necessarily have to be on stage. It can be in a lot of different settings. So we've tried to keep all the points as universal as possible. So try to pick and adapt these based on whatever situation you're in. But mostly these work best when you're introducing somebody on stage in front of a crowded audience. Okay, so the first thing is saving the name for the end. A small tweak that can make a big difference. I have 6 more points to share with you. Now, the next point is a little more foundational, which is research. When we're researching the person we're going to be introducing, we need to go beyond just the basic age, occupation, name, and all that of the person. We need to try and look for some golden nuggets that will actually get the audience excited about the person who's going to come next. And one simple way to do that is to add some sort of story or anecdote about that person. If you know them personally, you can try and add a personal story, or you can try and add something that you read online or that somebody else has told you about that particular individual who you're going to be introducing. For example, when I was in college, I was hosting this theater contest, and the judge happened to be the owner of a theater company that I had interned with. So when I was doing his introduction, I mentioned that I have been fortunate enough to be mentored by one of the judges that we have today. And I went on to give the story about the first day of my internship. And I went on to say that while this guy is an expert in theater, he's a lot more invested in teaching the youth. So adding that little anecdote in just made the introduction a lot more personalized. So if you do know the person, try and add some sort of a personal anecdote, or try to find out something that will actually help excite the audience in a story format. And the third thing to keep in mind is to simply keep our introductions short. This is a pretty straightforward point. The audience is here to listen to the person who we're introducing, so we shouldn't try and cross about more than 120 seconds with our introductory speech. Fourth thing to do. When you call on somebody, shake their hand before you depart the stage. There are 2 reasons for this. One is that it's a formal acknowledgement that the spotlight is now on them and that you're done with your part. And secondly, it just looks so much more professional and it looks so much cleaner instead of just calling the person on and just departing on the other end. The next thing that we can do is to add a little bit of a prelude or nickname right before we say the actual name of the person that we're calling on stage. Now, I'm finding it a little hard to explain this, so I'm going to play you 3 examples again from Impact Theory. Just look at what Tom says right before he says the name of the person he's going to call on stage.
The human guinea pig himself, Tim Ferriss. The man who has been called the ultimate entrepreneur for the information age, Seth Godin. The master of motivation herself, Mel Robbins.
And adding this sort of prelude right before you say their name does 3 things. One is that it sums up the entire introduction in just a few words. Second is that it adds a lot more credibility to the person you're calling on stage. And lastly, it just sounds so much better to add something like that right before you say the person's name. The 6th thing is to try and do something different within your introductions. Now, if we stick to what we discussed before, our introductions will probably be just fine. But by adding in different formats or different elements, can help make our introductions stand out and actually make them a lot more memorable. I have 2 examples here. First is video. Again, back in college, I was hosting another event, and the guest of honor happened to be the owner of this advertising agency. And this guy just had so many credentials that I knew if I just read them out when I was introducing him, my classmates would just get bored. So instead, a few of us got together and we made this little video about him. which spoke about the companies he's built, the work he's done so far. And I think it was about a 60-second video, and it's probably the same information that I would have said with my words, but because it was presented in a different format, everyone was just so much more gripped onto it and could consume the information a lot more easily. In fact, after the event was done, the guest speaker actually came up to us and thanked us for making this video because he hadn't seen anybody put so much effort into an introduction before. If you do have the time and resources to put together a simple basic video, try doing that. It'll make the introduction stand out a lot more, and it will make if there's a lot of information that you have to give out, it will make it a lot more easier to consume rather than someone speaking it up. The second idea here is to try and use a prop within your introduction. Now, I've only seen this happen once, but it was just such a memorable experience that I had to share it with you. I was attending this event where the keynote speaker was a cycling champion, and the host of that event, who was by no means a cyclist, came on stage riding a bike. And it was just so weird and absurd to see that happen. So he came on stage while riding a bike and got off the bike and started giving his actual introduction. But as soon as he entered the stage riding a cycle, it just gripped everyone onto him. Like, what is happening here? And secondly, after he came out and started speaking, we were a lot more engaged in what he had to say, as opposed to him just coming on normal. Now, of course, it's not possible for everyone to get something like a cycle on stage, but any sort of a prop that we could use which would help grab the audience's attention from the very beginning will help warm the audience up that much more for the actual speaker who's about to come. And the seventh and last point is to simply practice your introduction. It's not going to be more than a minute or two long, so practicing it even 2 or 3 times is going to make such a big difference as opposed to not practicing it at all. And that's about it. That's how we make our introductions stand out and a lot more engaging. If you have any more questions when it comes to things like public speaking, communications, or anything in that realm, we have an entire website with in-depth articles and resources dedicated just for that. So go check out franticallyspeaking.com.